Hello. I guess I just start then with my little talk. Yeah, thanks a lot for inviting me. I'm a lawyer here in Germany, and I'm specialized in data protection law and internet law. And I was asked for this conference to give a short summary because it is exactly now today. It's exactly 1 year since the new European data protection laws regulation were installed. So we have a little anniversary to celebrate today. Yeah. And so I am planning to give you a very short interim report on what this regulation was bringing to the companies making business in Europe. And the subtitle is, and this is some kind of astonishing, is why does this regulation now, all of a sudden, you can see this in 2-3 weeks, that Mark Zuckerberg from Facebook and also Tim Cook from Apple start in public on conferences and in public statements to promote the European GDPR regulation as being a very good example for a general worldwide regulation to protect privacy data on the internet. So this is some kind of surprising, and this is really the newest intention, because when I was last time at the last conference, when I was in November last year, when I was invited in Moscow, the conference was called New Culture of Communication in the Conditions of Digital and Social Cultural Globalization. It was in the middle of November last year. And there I was explaining that mainly the main reason why the European Privacy Data Protection Regulation was installed at all was, from a more strategic point, the first attempt of the states, the countries of the European Union, to enforce the protection of their regulation power against the big internet companies. Because the problem we were facing in Europe was that processing and collecting private data from people using these platforms is the business model of these big internet companies. So, and in Europe, we had this since, especially in Germany, since the 1980s, we had this privacy data protection regulations. And so now with the GDPR regulations, they want to protect the privacy not against state, the government and its organizations, but against the economical interests of this big internet company. So that was one big motivation. And so that was the main reason that these regulations were installed at all. And I already stated in the November conference that the EU and the governmental organization, like the EU Commission and the EU Parliament, had to break with traditional concepts how they install European-wide regulations, especially for installing the GDPR regulation, because they were installed not as a law traditionally, like the Parliament is deciding on it, the EU Parliament, and not one national parliament was at no point involved in deciding on these new regulations, because the EU installed it as an administrative regulation. Exclusively the Commission did it. So it was an act of administrating and not on parliaments or the legislative power. They did that because they wanted to make sure that at one particular date in all of the 28 European states, exactly the same regulations were installed. And this is, you have to dig a little bit more into the way how European legislation works. But this was the only way they felt like they could effectively regulate and protect personal data against these internet platforms, because then the whole European community, was showing, as one big block with one exactly identical regulation. And the second thing is that what they did is Europe transferred the marketplace principle, which is well known from international trading, changing goods, making businesses in different countries. And it basically says whatever company wants to make business in Europe, in Germany, in England, whatever, needs to respect economical regulations in that country, in that market. Like and the antitrust laws and all these things. And that's internationally well known. Like when a German business wants to make business in Russia, they have to respect Russian legal conditions. And so this economical concept, they transferred into the area of privacy data protection in this way that no matter where on earth data from a European citizen is somehow processed, and no matter where this company is located, it has to watch this GDPR regulations. And so this enabled all of a sudden business concepts like cloud computing or having data transferred in a different country with a low standard of data protection. They all now were forced to watch this regulation, because otherwise really high fines were expected to be paid. And now after 1 year, let's go into this data protection regulation. Did it really work? What came out of that? And so I would like to change or to take a different look at the European countries first, and then businesses from outside the European community. When you look at businesses within the European community, at the very beginning, there was a lot of exciting complaints and discussions and negative things. But that was basically caused because the regulations gave companies a little bit more of documentation duty. So companies whose business was data processing, or companies who had a decent-sized data center, are forced to make more documents and how they process personal data. And so everybody was heavily complaining and arguing against the really big new high fines. But this discussion within Europe, it's really gone. Now, after 1 year, every once in a while, you see a little article about, oh, where did it go? So this is gone from public interest. Everybody very shortly got adjusted to it, it is doing its job, and it's not part of the public discussion anymore. And this has basically, you could say that within Europe, the GDPR regulations really disappeared from the public discussion. There are different reasons for that, but one reason is definitely that the national supervisory authorities who really watch that everybody is watching the regulation were not very active. One thing was the fines. All Germany, to give you an idea, up until today, there were just 75 fines against 75, not more. It's just like nothing. And the biggest fine was against one platform called Knuddel.de, that was a dating platform. And they happened to have all the member data public in the internet, which is in a dating platform, it's not that nice. Eh? They had to pay 20,000 euros. That's all. So nobody is really afraid of the fines anymore within Europe. And the second thing is that from that all these supervisory authorizations in different nations were overwhelmed with requests from companies outside Europe asking, what do we have to do, support us, give us information. And they were really not capable in doing any kind of watching things and doing some research on whether the regulation were watched or not. The second why companies in Germany are not really discussing it in the public anymore is they more or less accept it. They have to change their processes a little bit. It's discussed. This is privacy by design. That's the technical aspect of that. But so far, everybody got arranged with it, and they're doing their job, and nobody is talking about it. What's completely different is the situation from the companies that are doing business in Europe from outside. They had a big problem in accepting this and getting used to the new regulations. And that has to do that, in big parts of the world, protecting privacy and privacy data was never really a political issue. It was just not a point of discussion. And when you think about the time before the internet, there was no real need for that. So because there was always the conflict between the state collecting private data for some kind of necessity, they need to use it. But the conflict to protect your privacy against misuse by international big companies, that's really new. But really interesting is, and also one point I have to add, which is very important, practical day-to-day business, is the cloud service providers. But it goes from big cloud service providers like IBM, whatever, or Amazon, but also little cloud services like giving you an archive system or backup, providing you with a little backup system for your data on a laptop. In the meantime, almost everybody of them has fulfilled the requirements of the GDPR, meaning offering these special ADP contracts. That means guaranteeing you that they will watch your privacy data. That's all. Really interesting, and this is now I'm getting to the more interesting part, is the reaction of the so-called Big Five. These are the Big Five internet companies really dominating the business in the internet. And since we know that their main core business model is collecting private data and selling it and making money out of that, they had to somehow react on this regulation. And in the first slide, they did. Like Google, in the very first month, was every week changed their private data regulation. But it got calm now, so they are adjusted. There is one big fine I think it's in France. It's a 500,000 euro fine against Google, but it's still in the legal process. So Google is not accepting it, so they started a lawsuit. This is the first decent one that happened within the first year. But the interesting part is, or on the other hand, Facebook. They started a huge marketing campaign. In every newspaper and magazine, they were advertising and make Facebook, private Facebook, and protect your private. So in a way that you can, that you get the authority to determine who is going to read your news and not. So they were selling this a little bit. So they reacted, and they are adjusting in the meantime too. But the really astonishing thing is that they now start to promote this as the European regulation being a standard for worldwide regulation, and that has mainly two reasons. The one thing has to do with the system, how the European data regulation, how do they ensure the protection of personal data? What's the legal technique in doing it? And you have to understand that in Article 6 of the regulation, it says generally it's forbidden to process personal data unless either way you have a law, a legal permission that allows you particularly to process this, or you have the permission of the person, the data you want to process. And the one interesting thing is that in one part in Article 6 says every data that you share and process in fulfilling a contractual obligation is allowed anyway. So this Article 6 is the most important legal permission justification to process personal data without asking permission or anything else. And in this particular case, it allows to collect data without any permission, without asking, as long as it's part of your legal obligation of the contract. That is something that these big companies find interesting because, for example, Facebook is organizing the relationship to his still members, which are more than 3 billion over the world. Each one has a single user contract negotiation, a user contract with Facebook, which is very complicated. It has a lot of general terms and conditions in it, but everybody accepts to that. And what they found now is the system of the data protection is that they just need to put the way they want to collect data, and they want to process it, and they want to use it. They just have to put it into the general terms and conditions, and they need not even to ask people if they are allowed, if they are willing to do that. Because of this technique, that everything that's part of a contractual obligation is accepted, it's legally, it's fine. So at the end of the day, this means they can exactly go on the way they do and collect data and need not to really change the whole business model. They just have to put in the way they collect into the general terms and conditions of the contract, and that's it. So the GDPR regulations in Europe basically enable them not to in any way change their business in commercializing personal data. That is not a problem, because the idea of protecting privacy data is the whole thing that the regulation wants is guarantee transparency. That's it. You are not. It doesn't forbid any way of collecting data, even very sensitive personal data on your health and your sexual orientation or whatever. It's not forbidden. It is just have to make it transparent. Either way, have to have a legal ground or the definite permission of the person data that you are collecting. And since whatever is the contractual obligation is legally, in Article 6 says that's a legal reason, so just put it into, and then it's fine. Everything is legal, everything is okay. And these guys could go on with the business. The second part, I don't want to take the time. The second part is a little bit more of a political problem and a political reason. Like I told you, there is no privacy data protection legislation in the United States up until today. There has never been a political discussion. They never felt like that being worth being protected for the people. You know, they never got the idea that they might be manipulated by whoever has their data. But that changed since this this public discussion with this big data scandals with Facebook, and also with the election of Donald Trump as being the president, with the Cambridge Analytica services. In the United States, the political discussion starts that it's worse to make data, privacy data protection, to regulate it, so that to protect the private data. And so what happened after this political discussion is that in the 1st of January 2020, next January, the state of California will have its first official data protection regulation. This is called California Consumer Privacy Act. And this regulation, in one way, is tougher for companies than the European. In addition to that, other states in the United States usually already discussing taking over this regulation, but changes a little bit. So the conclusion is why the big companies who were the target reasons for this regulation now, after 1 year, start to promote it as a worldwide standard gives two reasons. One, they can go on with the business model as they want. Second, they otherwise they have the danger that within 1 year they have 15, 20 different national laws within the United States, different states, which also for them requires a lot of work to watch these different regulations. And this is why they promote European data regulations as being a very good example for becoming the worldwide standard for protecting privacy in the internet. Well, now I'm through. That's it. I hope you were able to follow a little bit.